My dad's 1952 John Deere A has a serious coolant leak. By the time we got back, the steel line that runs from the manifold on top of the block up to the radiator had a pinhole in it. So Jeremy had to heat this thing and remove it and press a new one in.
I have my marks made. I know exactly where the pipe needs to be. Once I press it in there, it'll have it hold its angle. Life should be good.
This is kind of a tedious process because if you don't get this tube clocked just perfect, it'll either hit the gas tank or rub the exhaust manifold. To make this process easier, Jeremy froze the tubing in the freezer up at the house and then pressed it in the elbow. After he made sure it was clocked perfectly, he went ahead and brazed the two together. Once he was finished brazing it up, he mocked it up on the tractor just to make sure it was going to fit before Dad shot the paint on it. Dad intends to repaint the entire tractor, but he wants to repaint these small pieces while we've got them apart. The next morning, Vicki and I are outside working in the shop, cleaning, organizing, and doing inventory. And of course, I had to take a few minutes to play with my dogs outside. They were adamant on some frisbee time today. I couldn't say no. Vicki had gone with the kids yesterday down to Kentucky and went racing at Thornhill. And she sold some merchandise down there, so she needed to go back through and take inventory of what we still had and update the computer. Once I got done playing frisbee with the dogs, I jumped in the 64 and I headed up towards the farm. I want to go up and help Dad and Jeremy on that John Deere A today and take some video because Dad's tractor has been parked in the same spot at the farm for over 10 years. It runs, but the tractor hasn't moved under its own power in almost 20 years. And today may be the day that we find out whether the tractor will actually move itself and if the transmission and clutch are still in good usable shape. Out of all the old tractors up at the farm, that 52 is in probably the best condition out of all of them. I hung out and took a little bit of video and waited on Jeremy to show up, and then we headed into the shop. The first thing we did was check to see if Dad's paint set up before Jeremy started prepping the block to bolt the manifold back down. So what's on the agenda for today, Uncle Bucko?
Install Dad's water pipe on the Deere that he's got done brazing back together.
What was wrong with this one?
It had a pinhole in it.
It's pretty thin. It's got a lot of rust in it.
Never seen one go bad. It was the first one we've ever brazed back in. People sold us the part. They said that you usually have to buy two of them because somebody usually screws up the first one, but we got it done in one shot.
So Jeremy carries a manifold back to the back of the shop and gets ready to put it back on the tractor. Now, as long as this thing doesn't leak, the tractor should fire up and run and power itself out of the shop. But this thing has fought Jeremy and Dad for the last 2 weeks with a leak that pops up seemingly out of nowhere in a different place every time. Hopefully today they find out that this thing has no more leaks and is ready to head to the field because planting season is right around the corner. The cooling system on the John Deere A holds approximately 8 gallons of coolant. So if this thing springs a leak, you've got quite a bit of coolant to recover and salvage if you can. And Jeremy's gotten pretty good at it, because this is like the 3rd or 4th time they've drained and refilled the cooling system on this tractor. Once he had it filled, he did find a slight leak at the hose clamp up on the radiator, but a little bit of tightening straightened that right out. Finally, it's time to open the shop and find out whether this old John Deere will power itself all the way to the end of the driveway and back without any problems. Hopefully the transmission and all the gears still work. The old John Deere A fires right up. No problem so far. Next, we find out whether the clutch will actually work and whether the transmission's still in good shape. This is the first time Dad's ever driven this tractor. And the entire engine is fresh from the carburetor to the rod and main bearings. Dad pulls it outside, makes a few adjustments to the carburetor, and determines everything looks like it's okay. The tractor sounds good. It's time to see how the transmission does and take it down the driveway. We give the tractor one more go over before we turn Dad loose with it down the driveway, checking the tires, the coolant system, the oil pressure, and everything looks good. So Dad jumps on the tractor and he heads down that driveway for his first test drive on a tractor he bought 10 years ago that he's never driven before. Now, he doesn't just collect these tractors to restore them. He actually works ground with them. He intends to plow the entire farm this spring with this 1952 John Deere A, as his John Deere 60 is needing a rebuild. So as the 60 takes a break this season, this John Deere A is going to have to take up the slack. On the way back up the driveway, Dad stops and checks every gear in the transmission. All the gears work fine, the clutch disengages and engages just fine, the oil pressure looks good, and the water temperature is stable. With 4 new tires and a fresh engine, the cooling system wrapped up, this tractor should be ready to work ground in a couple of weeks. After we got done helping Dad with his John Deere, I got a text message from Austin at Lucor. The Malibu's done. So Jeremy and I jump in the 64 and run up to the northwest side of Columbus, pick up the Malibu and bring it back to my place. We made it back to the house just before dinner, and guess who wants to go out?
Guess what? I win.
You win what?
Sunday dinner decision. Heading to Cracker Barrel.
Like you had to argue with me over that. Now, as usual, she's backseat driving all the way there, and she's in a big hurry.
What are the chances this late that I'm going to get it? All right, now park far away from everybody.
I was going to park right there.
All right, that'll do.
Well, you already missed it.
I want you to ding it.
Who gives a It's not painted. That's the whole idea behind this ragamuffin thing. So I back up and park the truck where I had intended to park it to begin with. And then she makes her way inside.
We're about to find out.
Thank you very much.
Can't get distracted. No bunnies right now.
Now, if you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you know that Vicky likes going to get pot roast on Sundays at Cracker Barrel. But usually we don't get there in time and then they're out of it. But when she does get it, she has to video the whole thing. Tonight she lucks out, because 9 times out of 10, they're out of it by the time we get there. After dinner though, she has all the time in the world to go shopping for Easter eggs and Easter bunny stuff. I could only take so much of it before I said, I'm going out to the truck. I'll see you when you come out. So Monday morning, we're back on the Malibu. I've got some work to do out here in the shop, and the dogs were raising Cain, wanting to come out and be with me. So Vicky texts me and tells me they're on their way. I just so happened to catch it on film this time. Anyway, Rich did a fantastic job putting another set of gears in the back of this Malibu. However, now the speedometer's off again. Unfortunately, this time to fix the speedometer, I'm going to have to change the drive gear on the output shaft. So I run to Jegs while Kenny works on the Malibu changing the oil. Now, unfortunately, the weather's not looking too good this week, and I don't really have time right now to fuss with that drive gear. I want to get the carburetor tuned in before it rains. All right, so we got the car back from Lucor yesterday. Gear sounds perfect in it. It's much more lively with the 410 in it than it was the 373. However, it was pretty cold last night. It was down in the high 30s, and it still had this terrible stumble to it. And I think part of that is because it was so cold. The air was so cold. Regardless, it's still lean. It's still got this stumble. And the only thing that I have left to do to cure it, that I haven't done yet, is to put a bigger squirter on the accelerator pump and maybe change the pump cam. So before I get into that, what I wanted to do was have Kenny ride with me and take some video of what the car's doing so that I can show you guys what I'm dealing with, and hopefully when I change this pump cam and the squirter out, it fixes this little stumble, and hopefully I can help explain better that way what I'm doing. I'm going to bring it out to about 1800, foot brake it, and mash it and see if it dies. Hear it?
Yep.
It's got that terrible stumble to it. Hopefully you guys can hear that dead spot in the carburetor. You can see the difference between my foot going down on the pedal and the car taking off. So after my successful demonstration of how the carburetor has a serious problem, we bring the Malibu back to the shop and the dogs are there to greet me. June always wants to go, but Scrappy isn't much on the loud exhaust. She'd rather sit back and watch. So I could probably do this on the car, but for the sake of trying to film it so that you guys can see what I'm doing, it's probably best just to go ahead and pull the carburetor clear off the car. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We'll put it up on the bench, we'll take it apart, see what's in it. I know what's in the primary because I had it off already, but I have no idea what jets or what's in the back. So we'll just take this thing off real quick and we'll put it up on the bench. So once I disconnect all the vacuum lines and the fuel lines, I pull the carburetor off and hang it upside down in the parts cleaning tank to dump all the raw gas out of the fuel bowls. So we're going to go ahead and just pull the front bowl off, just so I can show you guys what's inside of it. Now I did the other day replace the power valve. It came stock with a 4.5 power valve, and I replaced that with an 8.5 to bring the fuel curve in a little bit earlier. But it got better, but the initial stumble that we're having is an accelerator pump issue, mostly because the engine in the car is a 355 cubic inch. It's just a flat top piston. It's got probably a 41 thousandths thick head gasket and a 65 cc chamber. So it's not the most efficient chamber with a mild hydraulic roller camshaft that's in it. But when you kick the secondaries open and you tromp this thing wide open throttle on that great big Super Victor intake, you tend to have a little bit of a problem with the air-fuel ratio when you initially hit the throttle wide open. Once it's wide open and the boosters are working and the venturies pick up velocity, it's fine. But that initial transition from idle or just off idle to wide open throttle can get tricky when you've got a really mild engine with a large intake, which is what I've got. So the first thing I do is remove the two Allen head squirter screws and replace the 31 numbered squirters with 35s. Very simple task. Just be careful what you're doing with the washers and the gaskets. Next, I pick out an accelerator pump cam based on this chart. The blue cam has the most aggressive ramp. So I change out the stock pink cam in the front for a blue one and put a green cam in the back. All right, so while we've got this thing apart, I'm going to go ahead and jet the back down just a little bit because I feel it's a little bit rich due to, I looked at the plugs the other night, they're a little bit black. But in the videos of the car, I've witnessed it in firsthand, and in the videos you can see that it'll roll a little bit of black smoke through low gear. So I'm just going to go ahead and jet these down just a little bit. They've got 84s in them. I'm going to jet them down to an 80, just because I typically only try to run like a 6 jet spread, and we may have to jet it back up, but this is trial and error because we don't have an air-fuel ratio gauge in a car anyway. That would make things easier sometimes, but unless it lies to you. I've had that happen. Okay. So we've jetted the back down, 4 jet sizes. We've swapped out a 4.5 for an 8.5 power valve in the front. And we've swapped pump cams from a pink to a blue. We'll go ahead and put this thing back together, and then we'll set our accelerator pump arm clearance for the new cam. So once I replace the accelerator pump cams, I adjust the accelerator pump linkage to have just a tiny bit of preload on the arms, not very much. But the idea is to have these adjusted so that the instant that cam turns, The accelerator pump arm actuates the pump, and the pump shot begins immediately. Once I had all that done, it's time to put the carburetor back on the car and check for leaks. So we've switched the accelerator pump cam in the front. We switched from pink cams to a blue one and a green one in the back. And we've switched from 31 squirters to 35s front and rear. And while I had it apart, I went ahead and jetted the back of the carburetor down 4 numbers. So I know that's a lot of changes at once, but I'm running out of time to get this done. And so I think we've got something to work with here. Let's take it out and test it, and we'll see if we've gotten this bog out of the carburetor and see if we've made any improvements. With the weather coming in tomorrow and what looks like rain the rest of the week, this may be my only chance to finally get this carburetor dialed in good enough to make the car raceable, possibly this weekend. Again, the weather is a problem. She had to go with us. All right, we'll stop and foot brake this thing real quick and see if we've got any improvement. About 2,000 right there. Didn't have a whole lot of heat in it when I made that first test hit. So I drove the car up to town, drove it around a little bit, tried to get some heat in it, and tried to talk June Pup into getting back into the back seat. She would have none of it. She has to be up front with Papa. I finally gave up. It's got just a tiny little bit of a stumble, but it's raceable the way it is. I think we're going to be all right. I'll stop at Jegs tomorrow and get another pump cam for the back, and I think we're going to be okay. So when we get back to the house, Kenny goes back out to work on his S10 and runs into yet another problem. This thing still won't run. It just so happens that Jeremy came down and he decided to take a look at it and see if he can figure out what on earth has gone wrong with this S10. So far, Kenny's probably spent $1,000 on it, and it doesn't run any better now than it did the day it started giving trouble. Well, maybe a little bit. If it's any consolation, that's the best it's run so far. I try my best to make Kenny feel a little bit better about the situation, because I feel pretty confident it's about to get squished.
The intake gasket's blown on his S10, that's why it runs like a...
Kenny, is that true?
It might be. We're gonna find out tomorrow.
Oh my God.
Put it this way, as it was backfiring, I noticed there was compression right next to my hand on the intake, so I stuck my hand over to the seam and it sucked my finger into the intake. And then as soon as it sucked my finger in and plugged the hole up, then it started running right.
Kenny, is that true?
Yep.
Are you trying to tell me that Uncle Bucko has solved the Kenny Powers S10?
That's not all of it. I walked over to look at it, and he had it locked up.
What?
He had it locked.
What do you mean? The engine was locked up?
No, the cab, so no one would steal it. He's solved. You don't get to crush his truck. It's a $1.59 gasket.
It might still jump a creek though.
Because Kenny has probably spent $1,000 in parts on the damn thing so far.
More than what's worth.
You know what lesson this is? Don't follow him.
I was following you.
I gotta see this for myself. So you're saying the intake gasket's blown and that's what's caused this whole mess?
Yep.
Oh, horse feathers. Start it up, Kenny. right, guys, welcome back to the shop. So today we finally made some progress on the carburetor on the Malibu. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to go to the racetrack and suffer your reaction time and your 60-foot times to a stumble in the carburetor. Not fun. But hopefully some of what I showed you guys today will help if you are having a similar problem with your car. Typically, if the carburetor is sized properly to the intake manifold and the cylinder heads and the combination, you won't really have that much trouble. However, this combination, I didn't buy this intake, I had it, and I just went ahead and used it. And there's nothing wrong with this intake. It's just a little bit large for this particular combination. However, it does make really good power in the upper RPM range. One thing I want to add that I didn't get a chance to show you guys during the tutorial today, I guess you'd call it, is a couple details on the accelerator pumps. One, gas carburetors will generally use 30cc pumps. There's two different size accelerator pumps for Holley style carburetors. There's a 30cc and a 50cc. Generally the 50s, if you find them on a gas carburetor, you'll only find them on the back for whatever reason. But 50s are generally used in methanol applications and E85 ethanol combinations, or on a Dominator. Some of the big Dominators will use 50cc accelerator pumps. But on the 4150 series carburetors, like what I'm using on the Malibu, generally if it's a gas carburetor, 30cc pumps are fine. Another thing I wanted to show you guys is that when you're swapping out these accelerator pump cams, there is a right way and a wrong way to install them. If you look closely at the accelerator pump cams, there's numbers on one side of the pump cam. Those always go towards the outside of the carburetor, and the smooth side of the pump cams always goes towards the main body. Okay, that's very important that you don't get that screwed up. You can put them on wrong. It takes a little doing, but you can do it. Also, if you find yourself in a position where you want to swap out a 30 for a 50cc pump, not only do you have to change the diaphragm, the pump housing screws are, of course, different, but also the accelerator pump arm is also different. So generally, if you want to switch from a 30 to a 50cc pump, you'll have to buy a kit. Holley sells a kit with the diaphragm, the housing, the screws, you are making it very difficult for me to do this. Tommy's out here rummaging through stuff above my shop up in the mezzanine there, like a damn raccoon up there making racket. He's looking at dart doors. Allison's old dart doors are up over top of the garage up there. Anyway, eventually, I think I'm going to go ahead and put a cowl induction hood on this car. Jeg sells a bolt-on 2-inch cowl hood, and I'd like to put one on because right now I don't have any hood clearance for an air filter. And I would like to be able to run an air filter on this car because at some point Vicky and I may take a few trips in it. But anyway, a cowl induction hood on this car will give me a little bit more hood clearance. I'll have a little bit of room for an air filter, and then also I'd like to maybe try a tapered spacer. I like those HVH 4-hole spacers, tapered spacers. I've had really good luck with those in the past, especially on something like this where the carburetor sized about right, but the intake manifold itself is maybe a little bit on the big side. Those tapered spacers tend to help build a little bit better signal and pull a little bit harder on the venturi and a little bit better signal to the booster. And that'll help a little bit of this stumble that I'm dealing with right now. But for right now, we've got it pretty well cured. I think it's going to be okay. I'm going to try and maybe take it to a track this weekend. I don't know what the weather is going to allow me to do. It's looking like Saturday kill care is not going to happen because of the weather. I don't know about Sunday at Edgewater. I'm still looking into that. Also, another thing that I'd like to do on the Malibu here, I don't know, within the next month or so, is I have what's left of an old 750 E85 carburetor. A friend of Billy's had it on his Mustang, and he switched from a 750 base plate and a 750 main body to, I believe, a 1050 main body and a 1050 base plate. So he parted out his 750 and sold me the remnants of what's left of it, and I've still got it back here. I talked to Uncle Terry at Jegs today, and he said that metering blocks are on back order, maybe at the end of this month. So if I can locate a set of quick fuel green E85 metering blocks and a handful of little parts that I need, I might go ahead and build that 750 E85 carburetor to put on the Malibu for this summer. Now, why would I do that? Well, first, E85 tends to make a little bit more power than pump gas. You can run a little bit more timing. The amount of fuel that you put through the engine helps boost compression just a little bit because you're putting a lot more liquid fuel in the cylinder. The other thing is it cools the intake, it cools the intake air fuel charge, and the engine runs quite a bit cooler. Now, the Malibu doesn't have any problems running cool so far, but in the heat of summer, when it's 90-some degrees and you're trying to bracket race or you're trying to index race it, you could use a little bit of help. Everybody's car could use a little bit of help there. In the past, I have made a change from racing gas. We were in, we were running 110 race gas in Billy's S10 a long time ago. And I switched from 110 race gas to E85, and the truck picked up 2/10. So we're on pump gas switching to E85, and I'm kind of interested to see if it doesn't make a little bit better power, maybe 3/10, I don't know. That may help get the car down into the 11s. I'm allowed to go 1150 in this car without a roll cage or a roll bar. And 12 flat is the pretty much limit for sportsman class. So 12 flat in the high 11s is about where I want this car to be on motor. If I can get it to go a little bit faster, that's fine. I can detune it and slow it down a little bit if I have to. But look for that in the future. I'd like to do a head-to-head, back-to-back, switch the car from gas to E85 right there at the track, do a long-term test on E85 so I can give you guys some idea what the fuel economy is, both on gas and E85. Really, the only downsides to E85 is the fuel economy suffers, and it's a little bit harder to find the stuff if you're out driving around. Not everybody has E85. So anyway, guys, that's going to about do it for tonight. Don't forget, Miss Vicky said to remind everybody, if you would still like to get your armbands for that giveaway for the John Milner 32 Ford die-cast replica that I've got in here, the armbands are up on the website. We're going to pull those the 27th. Go to theoldmansgarage.shop to get your entries in if you'd like to get in on that. And of course, the website's got all the merchandise if you guys are interested in hats, shirts, hoodies, beanies. And I've got some other stuff coming up here pretty soon. I've got some new ideas for some t-shirts, because all the LS guys that cry every time that small block Chevy with a carburetor beats the Falcon have given me some ideas for some new t-shirts.